imagine someone going through unimaginable hardship, like torture, fleeing war, losing everything, and they don't become depressed. What makes them different?
It is a really fascinating question.
Yeah, and you shared some really great material on depression for this deep dive.
Yeah.
And I think we can both learn a lot from it.
Yeah.
We've got a lecture from someone who's been studying and treating depression for over 40 years, and we've got an episode of the Huberman Lab podcast.
Right.
And he's a Stanford neuroscientist.
Yeah.
So between these two sources, we're going to equip you with a solid understanding of depression and its causes, and hopefully give you some new tools if you're struggling with it.
I think that's a great goal, and it's important to remember this too, right? Depression isn't just like a bad mood. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's something that could have a ripple effect, impacting everything from your mood, your relationships, to your job performance, even your physical health.
Yeah.
It can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, for example.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. And I think it makes sense why the World Health Organization declared depression the #1 cause of human suffering and disability.
Yeah.
So it's serious.
It is.
And one thing that really surprised me from the lecture was that depression can be contagious.
Oh yeah, how so?
Well, not like catching a cold,
Right.
but more about how our social interactions and behaviors we see modeled around us, especially in childhood, can influence our vulnerability.
I see.
So, for example, children of depressed parents have a 3 to 6 times higher risk of developing depression themselves.
Wow, that makes you think about the importance of early intervention and creating those really supportive environments, especially for families.
Yeah, it does. And the lecturer was really adamant that depression isn't just caused by external events.
Okay.
Right? It's about how you interpret and give meaning to them. He used this term attributional style,
What is that?
which is basically your default way of explaining things that happen to you. So, for example, if you spill your coffee, do you say to yourself, ugh, I'm such a klutz? Or do you say, wow, that table was really uneven?
I see.
And, it sounds basic, but that can have a huge impact on your mood and resilience.
It can. And he actually had a really powerful example in the lecture about someone struggling with chronic pain
Yeah.
who constantly attributed their pain to personal failings.
Yeah.
They felt like it was their fault that they were weak or somehow broken,
I see.
which led to this whole downward spiral of shame and hopelessness.
Making the pain even worse.
Exactly. And that's just one example of how those negative attributional patterns can really fuel depression.
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
In a way, yeah. But the good news is that we can learn to challenge those patterns and reframe our thinking.
Right.
It's about recognizing when we're falling into those traps and consciously choosing more of a balanced perspective.
Okay, so he talked about 5 key risk factors that can make people more susceptible to depression. And luckily, he said that they're all things that we can work on.
Okay.
The first one is called internal orientation.
What is internal orientation?
Well, he says it's essentially letting your feelings kind of dictate your decisions and interpretations of events. So instead of gathering information and really assessing the situation objectively,
Right.
you let your emotions run the show.
Okay.
And I think that's a recipe for unnecessary drama sometimes.
For sure. And he had this example in the lecture about a student who, after receiving a bad grade on a test,
Okay.
immediately decided that they were stupid and they would never succeed in school.
Wow.
Yeah, they just let their disappointment and frustration spiral into a judgment about their abilities without stopping to consider other factors, like the difficulty of the exam or their overall academic performance.
Yeah, it's really easy to fall into that trap when you're feeling down, and it's like your emotions put on these dark tinted glasses and suddenly everything just looks bleak.
I know, it's true.
Yeah.
So what can you do about that?
Well, the lecturer said that the key is to train yourself to reality test your assumptions.
Okay.
So instead of letting those feelings dictate your reality, take a step back, put your detective hat on and say, okay, what's the evidence for and against my interpretation? Is there another way to look at the situation?
It's like being your own lawyer, right? Building a case.
Exactly. Okay, the next one is stress generation,
Stress generation. Okay.
which is kind of a vicious cycle.
Okay.
So it's the tendency to make choices that actually worsen or prolong your depression.
I see.
And often this is because you're making these decisions based on how you feel in the moment rather than what's truly in your best interest long term.
It's like you're sabotaging yourself without realizing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're stuck in this negative feedback loop.
Yeah.
So, for example, the lecturer gave an example of someone who's feeling really exhausted and overwhelmed and decides to skip their therapy appointment,
Right.
even though they know it would really help them. Or someone who is feeling hopeless about their job search and they stop sending out applications and they isolate themselves at home.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's so easy to let those feelings dictate our actions, especially when you're in the midst of depression.
It is. And so the key here is to recognize that these decisions are often driven by the depression itself,
I see.
and then try to make choices that align with your long-term goals,
Right, so even if they feel difficult in the moment,
even if they feel really difficult.
you got to do what's good for you.
Yeah, you got to make choices that support your well-being, even if you don't feel like it.
Exactly. And that takes a lot of self-awareness and discipline to break out of those cycles, huh?
It does.
Okay.
Okay, the next one is rumination, which I know I definitely struggle with.
Rumination, yeah. What is that?
So rumination is basically getting stuck in a loop of overthinking and analyzing problems without taking action.
Oh, I know that one.
It's that hamster wheel in your mind.
Yeah, it just keeps spinning.
That just keeps spinning, and it just keeps making you feel worse and worse. Oh yeah, it's exhausting.
It is. And so the antidote to that is action.
Action.
And I think he actually said timely and effective action, which I really like.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it. So instead of dwelling on the past, shift your focus to creating possibilities for the future.
Okay.
So, instead of getting stuck in the why, focus on the what now.
Right. Okay, I like that. What's next?
Okay, so the next one is global thinking.
Global thinking.
And it's kind of like rumination's cousin.
Okay.
It's the tendency to overgeneralize from specific experiences.
Oh, interesting.
So, you have a bad day at work and you think, ugh, my life is a failure.
Right.
Or you go on one bad date and you think, I'm never going to find love.
Yeah. I think we've all been there. The all or nothing thinking trap.
Exactly. And so the key to overcoming this one is to train yourself to think more specifically.
So instead of I'm a failure, say I didn't do as well as I'd hoped on that project, but I'm learning from my mistakes.
Right, exactly. And he actually gave a really good tool for this, flowcharts. Flowcharts.
Yeah.
Like for your feelings.
Yeah, because you can take those big, overwhelming goals
Okay.
and break them down into smaller, more manageable steps.
I see.
So instead of I want to be happy, which is a really global, kind of vague goal,
Right.
it's, what are 3 things I can do today to feel more connected and joyful?
Oh, that makes it feel much more doable.
Exactly. Okay, and the last one is unrealistic expectations.
Oh boy, we've all been there.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically setting ourselves up for disappointment by expecting things from ourselves or others that are just unlikely to happen.
Yeah.
We expect a partner to change drastically to meet our needs.
Right.
Or we expect ourselves to be happy and productive all the time.
Yeah. It's so easy to create these idealized versions of people in our minds.
It is.
And then we get disappointed when they don't live up to our fantasies.
Exactly. And we also set these impossibly high standards for ourselves.
Right.
And beat ourselves up when we inevitably fall short.
It's so true.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that? Unrealistic expectations.
Well, he talked about the importance of just consciously assessing your expectations before you go into any charged situation.
Okay.
So you say, okay, is this expectation realistic given what I know about myself or this other person?
Right. It's about acknowledging the limits of what you can control.
Yeah.
And remembering that imperfection is just part of being human.
We're all works in progress.
We are.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about the psychological and behavioral side of depression.
Yeah.
What about the biological side?
Yeah, so our brains are incredibly complex and we're still learning so much about them.
For sure.
But we do know that imbalances in key neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine can play a significant role.
Oh, okay. For those who aren't familiar with all of the neurochemicals, what do those do? What are those associated with?
So serotonin is often linked to mood.
Okay.
Dopamine is related to motivation and pleasure.
Got it.
And norepinephrine is involved in energy and alertness. So you can see how when these are out of balance, it can really throw things off.
Yeah, it's like your brain's internal pharmacy is just a little off.
It is. And it's not just neurotransmitters. The lecturer also mentioned hormones,
Okay.
like thyroid hormone and cortisol.
Yeah, what about them?
So depression is often associated with low thyroid hormone,
Okay.
which can impact metabolism and energy levels,
Interesting.
and also elevated cortisol,
Yep.
which is the stress hormone.
Right.
So it really is a whole body experience. It's not just in your head.
It's so true.
It affects your physical well-being as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you suspect you might be dealing with depression, it might be a good idea to get those levels checked.
It is a good idea, yeah, just to rule things out.
Yeah, get a thorough physical exam.
Yeah. What about genetics?
Oh, genetics. That's an interesting one.
Sure.
There's definitely a strong genetic component to depression, especially when it comes to how your brain processes serotonin.
Okay.
So if you have a family history of depression, you're definitely at a higher risk.
It doesn't mean you're destined to get it, but it's something to be aware of.
Right. It's like having a predisposition that you need to manage, just like you might manage a predisposition to heart disease.
Exactly. What about inflammation? I've heard that linked to depression, but I don't really understand how that works.
Well, there's actually growing evidence that chronic inflammation, and not just the kind that, causes pain and swelling, but this low-grade inflammation
Okay.
throughout your body can actually contribute to depression.
So how does that work?
It's like this low-grade fire smoldering in the background, affecting your mood, your energy levels, and just your overall well-being.
So it's not just about physical discomfort.
Yep.
It's about the inflammation affecting your brain function.
Exactly. And there are things you can do to reduce inflammation.
Like what?
He specifically mentioned increasing your intake of EPA omega-3 fatty acids,
Okay.
which are found in fatty fish, like salmon and sardines.
Oh, I see.
You can also get them through supplements.
And does exercise help with inflammation?
It absolutely does. Regular exercise is one of the best things you can do to reduce inflammation throughout your body and brain.
Okay, let's talk about the NMDA receptor now. This was something from the Huberman Lab episode that really caught my attention.
Okay, what is it?
Well, it's involved in neuroplasticity,
Okay.
which is the brain's amazing ability to rewire itself and form new connections.
Oh, that is amazing.
It is, and this is becoming a key target for some of the most promising treatments for depression.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, well, I'm all ears.
So substances like ketamine and PCP,
Okay.
which are known for causing those kind of like dissociative states.
Right, like feeling detached from reality.
Exactly. They're now being studied for their potential as rapid antidepressants.
Okay.
And here's the really surprising part. They seem to work by blocking the NMDA receptor.
That is surprising because I thought NMDA was all about creating change in the brain.
So it's like they're creating change by blocking the very thing that usually drives change.
That's fascinating.
It is. And we don't fully understand it yet, but researchers believe that these substances might be inducing a temporary kind of separation from negative emotions and thought patterns.
So like hitting the pause button on that loop.
Exactly, like hitting the pause button, allowing for a reset of those brain circuits.
So giving your brain a fresh start, a chance to rewire itself in a more positive direction.
Yeah, but it's really important to emphasize that these are experimental treatments.
Absolutely
And
correct.
using them outside of a controlled medical setting is extremely risky.
Right, it's not about self-medicating, it's about working with professionals.
Exactly. Okay, and then there's psilocybin.
Psilocybin, okay.
So that's been getting a lot of attention lately for its potential in treating depression.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that.
Oh.
What is it exactly?
So it's the active compound in magic mushrooms.
Okay.
And there have been these studies in controlled settings that have been showing really promising results in treating major depression.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How does it work in the brain?
So it appears to be working, like ketamine, by rewiring neural circuits.
So again, it's not the experience itself.
It's not about the experience itself.
That's about the changes it makes.
Yeah, it's about the lasting changes in the brain. So psilocybin actually activates a specific serotonin receptor in a particular layer of the brain.
What layer is that?
It's called layer 5 of the neocortex, which is the outermost layer,
Oh,
involved in our higher level thinking,
okay.
decision making, planning, abstract thought. And it plays a really critical role in integrating information from different parts of the brain. And it's really interesting because layer 5 is particularly rich in connections between different brain areas
So maybe psilocybin is boosting that connectivity.
and allowing for new pathways to form between different parts of the brain. And here's another interesting finding. The type of psychedelic experience
Okay.
doesn't seem to matter.
It doesn't.
Like whether it's a good trip or a bad trip.
Wow.
It doesn't seem to matter for the therapeutic effect.
So what matters?
What matters is the rewiring
The rewire.
of the neural circuits that psilocybin seems to be facilitating.
So again, it's not about the subjective experience of the trip itself.
No.
It's about the changes it creates.
Exactly. Okay, there was also this other really interesting concept from the Huberman Lab episode that I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
The pleasure-pain balance in the brain.
What's that?
So it's about how our brains process pleasure and reward.
Okay.
So every time we experience something pleasurable,
Yeah.
our brain releases dopamine,
Right.
which is that feel-good neurochemical.
Right.
But here's the catch.
Okay.
Every surge of dopamine is followed by a dip,
Okay.
a kind of pain that manifests as a craving for more.
So it's like a seesaw.
Yeah, exactly. The more you chase the pleasure, the stronger that craving becomes.
And if we're constantly bombarding our brains with things that release dopamine, social media, Netflix, junk food, are we making that worse?
Yeah, you can tip the balance towards the pain side. You become desensitized to pleasure. And that can contribute to anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure.
Oh,
It can contribute to addiction
Right.
and even depression.
So it's about finding a healthy balance.
It's about finding that healthy balance and not letting our pursuit of pleasure become a runaway train.
So what did Dr. Huberman suggest?
He actually suggested incorporating periods of boredom.
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 I thought we were supposed to avoid that at all costs.
I know, right? It sounds counterintuitive, but allowing ourselves to just be bored,
Okay.
to just sit with our thoughts and feelings without any distractions can actually help to reset that balance.
Interesting.
It prevents us from becoming desensitized to the simple joys.
So like giving our brains a break from all the stimulation.
Exactly, allowing our reward system to recalibrate.
Okay.
So, too much of a good thing can be bad for you.
Right. And it's not just about like limiting screen time or cutting out sugar or whatever.
Right.
It's about creating space for other experiences and emotions to emerge.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, we've talked a lot about biological stuff, psychological stuff,
Right.
but we haven't really touched on social factors.
True. What do they have to say about that?
Well, they both highlighted the contagious nature of depression,
Yeah.
and particularly its impact on family dynamics.
All right. Because children of depressed parents have a much greater risk.
Exactly. And that's not just genetics.
Yeah.
It's about the environment, the behaviors they witness, the emotional climate.
Yeah. So it makes you think about the importance of creating a supportive environment
It does.
for families who are struggling with depression, both for the individual and their loved ones.
And it highlights the need for early intervention.
Yeah.
Breaking those cycles of negativity.
Right. Which can just perpetuate across generations.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we are all interconnected
Yeah,
and our mental health impacts the people around us.
it really does. And that is a great segue into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll be talking about some of the latest research and potentially groundbreaking new treatments.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Me too. Welcome back to our deep dive on depression. Now, in the last part, we talked about some of the psychological and social factors,
Neat.
but I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the biological factors.
Okay.
And this is where the Huberman Lab episode really gets interesting.
Yeah, he had some great insights.
He did. So he talked about thyroid hormone.
Yeah.
And he said that a significant percentage of people with major depression, he said it's around 20% actually have low thyroid hormone.
Wow, 20%. That's significant.
Yeah, it is. And I didn't realize it was that high.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So what's the connection between thyroid hormone and depression?
Well, thyroid hormone is really crucial for regulating metabolism.
Okay.
And when it's low, it can lead to a whole bunch of symptoms.
Like what?
Like fatigue, weight gain, low mood, difficulty concentrating.
And those all overlap with depression.
Exactly. And that's why he said if you're experiencing those symptoms, it's a good idea to get your thyroid levels checked.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a simple blood test, right?
Yeah, it is.
And if there is a thyroid imbalance, can that be addressed pretty easily?
It can, yeah. Addressing that can actually make a big difference in how you feel, both physically and emotionally.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And he also talked about childbirth and the impact that can have on thyroid function.
Oh, right. Because that's a big hormonal shift, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it can sometimes disrupt thyroid function, leading to postpartum depression.
Which can manifest as fatigue, low mood, anxiety, even difficulty bonding with the baby.
Exactly.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it is. And it's a good reminder that, hormonal fluctuations can have a huge impact on our mental health.
Definitely. And it's not just childbirth, is it? Like other life stressors can also impact thyroid function.
Right, absolutely. Things like illness, job loss, relationship problems, financial stress.
Yeah.
All of that can throw your hormones out of whack, including your thyroid hormone.
Right, so it's all connected.
Yeah, it is. Okay, let's talk about cortisol,
Cortisol, the stress hormone.
the stress hormone. So we all know that stress is bad.
Right. Chronic stress is a major risk factor for depression.
Exactly. But Dr. Huberman actually shared some research that I think puts that into perspective.
Oh, okay. What was it?
So he said that studies have shown that experiencing 4 or 5 bouts of really intense long-term stress
Yeah.
can significantly increase your risk of developing major depression.
Wow. And is that true even if you don't have like a genetic predisposition?
Even if you don't, yeah.
So it's not just about feeling stressed. It's about the cumulative impact.
It's about the impact on your brain and body.
And that's why those stress management techniques are so important.
They are, yeah. He actually has a whole episode on conquering stress,
Oh, does he?
which I highly recommend if you haven't listened to it already. It's got a ton of practical tips.
I'll check that out. What are some of the key takeaways from that episode?
Well, he talks about the importance of sleep, spending time in nature, mindfulness,
Yeah.
engaging in activities that bring you joy, all the things that we know are good for us, but we don't always do.
Yeah, we don't always prioritize, right? It's about creating a lifestyle that supports your well-being.
Exactly. And it's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Right, taking care of yourself before things get out of control.
Exactly. And he also talked about genetics.
Yeah, because some people are just more vulnerable to stress than others,
Yeah,
right?
it seems like, so there's this gene, 5-HTT-OPR.
5-HTT-LPR.
Yeah, it's involved in serotonin transport in the brain.
Okay.
And variations in this gene can actually influence how sensitive we are to stress.
So it's like having a lower tolerance for stress.
Exactly. And that doesn't mean that you're doomed to develop depression,
Right.
but it means that stress management is super important.
Especially for those who might be more susceptible.
Exactly. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about some more experimental treatments for depression that he discussed.
Right.
So the first one is ketamine.
Ketamine, oh wow. Like the anesthetic.
Yes, so it's traditionally been used as an anesthetic,
Right.
but it's generating a lot of interest in the mental health field because it's been shown to have these rapid antidepressant effects.
Oh wow. So it works quickly.
Yeah, it does. And even in people who haven't responded to traditional antidepressants.
Interesting. And how does it work?
Well, here's the kicker. It works by blocking the NMDA receptor.
Wait, so blocking the receptor that's involved in brain change actually helps with depression?
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
It's a little counterintuitive, I know, but the research suggests that it might be inducing this temporary dissociative state,
Okay.
like a brief disconnect from reality,
I see.
that somehow allows for a kind of reset
A reset of what?
of those brain circuits involved in mood regulation.
Oh, so it's like rebooting a computer.
Exactly.
Wow.
But again, this is really important. This kind of treatment should only be done under the supervision of a qualified medical professional.
Absolutely. It's not a DIY project.
No, not at all. Okay, and then there's psilocybin.
Psilocybin, yeah. That's the one I've been hearing a lot about lately.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of buzz.
It is. So how is it being used to treat depression?
Well, so it's the active compound in magic mushrooms.
Right. Okay.
And it's showing really promising results in clinical trials.
So what's the thinking about how it works?
Well, like ketamine, it appears to be rewiring those neural circuits.
So again, it's not about the psychedelic experience itself.
No.
It's about the lasting changes in the brain.
Exactly. And psilocybin, it activates that same serotonin receptor that we talked about earlier.
The one in layer 5.
Yes, in layer 5 of the neocortex.
Okay. And that's involved in higher level thinking.
Right. Processing, planning, decision making.
So that makes sense. And this activation leads to more connections between different parts of the brain, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And that may be what allows for those new thought patterns to emerge.
Interesting.
And what's really interesting is that the content of the experience, like whether it's a good trip or a bad trip, doesn't seem to matter much
Right.
for the therapeutic effect.
So what matters?
It's the rewiring process.
Rewiring, okay.
Yeah, and so the research suggests that, in conjunction with therapy,
Right.
psilocybin can help people break free from those negative thought loops
Okay.
and develop new perspectives.
So it's like psilocybin kind of creates the conditions for change, and then therapy helps you guide that change in a positive direction.
Exactly.
That's a really good way to put it. But it's still early days, right? More research is needed.
Yeah, it's still early days, but the initial findings are really encouraging.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of like cutting edge therapies.
Right.
What about just simple things like diet? Did he talk about the role of diet in depression?
He did, yeah. And I think this is something that often gets overlooked.
Yeah, we tend to think about diet in terms of physical health,
Right.
not mental health.
Exactly. But he said that diet plays a much bigger role in our mental and emotional well-being than we realize.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of know that intuitively, right?
We do.
We all know what it feels like to be hangry.
Exactly, yeah. When your blood sugar is low, you're not going to be in a good mood.
Exactly.
And those fluctuations can definitely impact our mood and our ability to think clearly.
So it's not just about avoiding the sugar crash. It's about nourishing our brains with what they need
It is, yeah.
to function properly.
He actually talked about the ketogenic diet.
The keto diet, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a popular one these days.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with mood?
So, the ketogenic diet is very low in carbs and high in fat.
Right.
And it forces the body to burn fat for fuel instead of glucose.
Okay.
And that actually leads to the production of ketones.
The ketones.
Which have been shown to have some really interesting mood stabilizing effects.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about weight loss.
It's not just about weight loss.
It's about changing the way our brains work.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. So is there research to support that? Like the keto diet helping with depression?
There is, yeah. The research is still emerging.
Okay.
But some studies have shown that it can be helpful, especially for people who haven't responded to other treatments.
Interesting. Okay, what else did he have to say about diet?
Well, he also talked about fermented foods.
Fermented foods, okay.
And, their importance for gut health.
Yeah, because of the gut-brain connection, right?
Yeah, so the trillions of bacteria that live in our guts
Right.
actually play a really crucial role in regulating our mood.
Yeah, it's amazing
And
how this whole other world inside of us is impacting our mental health.
it's incredible.
So is he saying we need to be eating more yogurt and sauerkraut?
Yeah, so fermented foods like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, they're rich in probiotics, which are those beneficial bacteria that support gut health.
So eating fermented foods is like giving our gut bacteria a boost.
It is.
Okay, so a healthy gut, a healthy mind.
A healthy gut, a healthy mind. And I want to circle back to inflammation, because we touched on that earlier.
Right, that low-grade smoldering fire.
Exactly. So he said that inflammation is a key player in a lot of chronic health conditions, including depression. And he said those inflammatory chemicals can really disrupt brain function.
So that's what's contributing to the fatigue and the low motivation.
And difficulty concentrating, yeah.
So it's not just about physical discomfort.
Right.
It's about it impacting your brain's ability to work properly.
Exactly. And this is where those omega-3s come in.
The EPA omega-3 fatty acids.
Yeah.
Okay, from fatty fish.
From fatty fish, yeah.
Okay.
They're really potent anti-inflammatory agents
Okay.
that can help to reduce inflammation throughout the body, including the brain.
So it's kind of a double whammy, right?
It is, yeah. Reducing inflammation and boosting serotonin.
Amazing. And don't forget about exercise too, because that helps reduce inflammation.
Absolutely.
Good reminder to get moving.
Okay, before we move on, I want to go back to this pleasure-pain balance in the brain.
Yeah, that was a really interesting concept.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Can you remind me what that's about?
So it's all about how our brains process pleasure and reward.
Okay.
So every time we experience something pleasurable,
Yeah,
our brain releases dopamine.
right. That feel-good neurochemical.
It is. But every surge of dopamine is followed by a dip,
Okay.
a kind of pain that manifests as craving for more.
Right. So it's like we're on this constant roller coaster.
Yeah, we're always chasing that dopamine high, but it always comes with a crash.
And if we're constantly bombarding our brains with dopamine.
It can tip the balance
Yeah.
toward the pain side.
So what can we do about that?
Well, he said that it's important to create space for boredom.
Boredom.
Yeah.
But isn't boredom bad?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know, but allowing ourselves to experience boredom.
Okay.
To just be present without any distractions.
Right.
It can help to reset that balance.
Interesting.
It prevents us from becoming desensitized to those simple joys in life.
So it's like giving our brains a break
Exactly.
from the constant stimulation.
Yeah, allowing that reward system to recalibrate.
I think that's a good lesson for all of us, not just people struggling with depression.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, there was one more thing that Dr. Huberman mentioned that I wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
Creatine.
Creatine, like the supplement that athletes take.
Yeah, it's usually associated with athletes.
Right.
But he said that there's some research to suggest that it might have mood-boosting effects.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
Well, it plays a role in energy production
Okay.
in the brain.
Yeah.
And studies have actually shown that supplementing with creatine can improve mood and reduce symptoms of depression.
And is this for anyone, or is it specifically for athletes?
Well, it seems to be particularly effective in women.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's another example of how supporting brain function
Yeah,
can have a positive impact on mood.
it is fascinating, right? How all of these systems are connected.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah.
A lot of really fascinating information about the biology of depression.
Yeah, and it's clear that research is really evolving quickly.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
We're learning more and more about the brain every day.
and that knowledge empowers us to take better care of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And before we wrap up this part, I want to circle back to this idea of the contagious nature of depression.
Yeah, because that was a really powerful concept.
Yeah, it is. And I think it highlights the profound impact that our environment and relationships can have on our mental health.
Right, so it's not just about what's happening inside of us.
No.
It's about the people around us.
Exactly. It's a reminder that, we're all interconnected.
We are.
And our actions and behaviors
Right.
can really affect those around us.
It's a call to action, I think,
I think so too.
to be more mindful of our own mental health and how we're impacting other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
And we'll continue the conversation in the next part where we'll talk about some final takeaways and some key things to remember about depression.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
So, we've spent a lot of time really diving deep into the world of depression.
Yeah, a lot of information.
We talked about, everything from the fact that it can be contagious, which I thought was so interesting,
Yeah, me too.
to, the potential of some of those new treatments like psilocybin.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
It is, yeah, but I think now we're at the point where it's like, okay,
Right.
what does this all mean for me, the listener?
Right. What can we take away from all of this? What can we do with it?
Exactly. So, what do you think is like the most important thing people should remember from this deep dive?
I think it's that even though depression is complex and there are all these different factors involved, we actually have more control over our mental health
Okay.
than we might think.
I agree. And I think that learning about those different risk factors and having those strategies to manage them can feel really empowering.
Yeah, totally. So whether that's shifting your thinking patterns, eating more omega-3s, or even just creating some space for boredom, there are so many things that we can actually do.
Yeah, it's not just about, passively accepting that this is your fate.
Exactly. You can take action.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, too, what we talked about, how depression can be contagious.
Oh, right.
So by taking care of our own mental health, we're also contributing to a healthier environment.
Right. For everyone around us.
For everybody around us, yeah. So it's like that ripple effect.
It is.
Our well-being impacts our families, our communities.
Even society as a whole.
Yeah, and I think if there's anyone listening who's really struggling right now,
Yeah.
it's important to remember you're not alone.
Yeah, and there is no shame in asking for help.
No shame at all. In fact, it's a sign of strength.
Totally. It shows that you're self-aware and you want to get better.
And that you're taking your mental health seriously. And luckily, there are so many resources available.
Yeah, there are.
From therapy and support groups to medication and even those new treatments we talked about.
Right, like the psilocybin and the ketamine.
Exactly. Recovery is absolutely possible.
It is.
And there is always hope.
Always. And sometimes just understanding the science behind it
Right.
can be that first step toward healing.
I agree. It kind of takes away some of the mystery.
Yeah, exactly. You can start to see how things work and where you might be able to intervene.
Right. It's like having a map
It is.
to navigate all of those complicated emotions.
I love that analogy. So it's a journey, right?
It is, yeah.
There are going to be ups and downs,
There are.
but it's important to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
Celebrate the small victories and never give up hope.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive on depression.
Wow, that was a lot.
It was a lot, but hopefully it was helpful.
I think it was.
Yeah. And before we go, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
So we've talked about all these different tools and strategies for managing depression.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it comes down to creating a supportive environment for ourselves.
Right, where mental health is prioritized.
Exactly, where we feel safe and empowered to really take care of ourselves.
I love that. And that starts with education and awareness. Right.
Yes.
The more we talk about mental health,
Yeah.
the less stigma there will be.
Exactly.
And more people will feel comfortable reaching out for help.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into depression.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to all of you listening, if anything we've discussed today has sparked your curiosity, or left you with questions,
Yeah.
please reach out. Let us know. We're always eager to, explore new ideas and to share our insights with you.
Absolutely.
So until next time,
Yeah.
Stay curious, keep learning, and take good care of yourselves.
So long, but you're still here, and that's your song. Through the pain, through the doubt, you'll find your way. There's no way out but through. Every scar tells a story you've won. The battle's hard, but it's not done. Fight for tomorrow, don't let it go. The strength inside you is starting to show. You're a warrior, unbreakable strong. Keep moving forward where you belong. Keep moving forward where you belong. The road is rough, the nights are long, but you're still here, and that's your song. But you're still here, and that's no way. There's no way out but through. When the voices say you're not enough, rise above, show them you're tough. Every tear, every fall is just a step to rise above it all. Fight for tomorrow, the bottle will break. You've got the power, no more to take. You're a warrior, unshakable, free. Keep moving forward with victory's key. You've come so far, the fight's in your hands. Tomorrow is yours, now take a stand. When the voices say you're not enough, rise above, show them you're tough. Fight for tomorrow, don't let it go. Don't let it go. You are starting to show. You got the power with no word. Breakable strong, keep moving forward where you belong. Where you belong. Oh, where you but through. The victory's key. You come so far that the fight's in your hands. Tomorrow is yours, now take a stand.